Hello, and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. Guess what, everyone?
What?
Jeff is back.
Jeff is back.
I love that you
Where
answered my rhetorical question. It's just been a while. We haven't had you on for a few episodes.
Because wherever I went, it wasn't very refreshing or relaxing. I can tell you that.
So this episode is not about rest.
Okay,
we
good.
already did that one.
Oh yeah,
So
that's right.
Go
we
back
did
and
do
listen
that
to that one. Actually,
I should listen to that one.
Jeff is back in the studio with us. We are so excited to have him back. Jeff, since you've been gone, actually, isn't that another song we were just singing? Since you've been gone.
Yeah,
I won't sing to you.
We were singing Who's Johnny? You guys remember that one? Some of you old people. Who's Johnny? She said, smiling. Anybody? Short Circuit, the movie? Nothing? No.
I got nothing for you. I have no idea. Yeah. I'm not that old.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay.
You are not that mature.
Not that mature either. That's fair. All right, I'll take it. Jeff, we had some listeners who have submitted questions. I love when listeners submit questions. We've also had listeners who have rated and reviewed our podcast. And so far, believe it or not, they've said wonderful things about this.
You know, I think you had me at we have listeners.
There you go. You're like, wait, what?
I know.
People are listening?
It blows my mind a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you to our listeners. But we really do. We want this podcast to be a resource to you. We know we have a lot of pastors who listen to this. I keep learning of pastors who actually send out some of these episodes to their volunteers, to parents. And so, Jeff, I recently learned there's a couple Christian schools that send out our episodes in their monthly newsletter to the parents at the Christian schools that they go to.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
We love that. We love being a resource to you. We want to be your go-to ministry partner. That's why we exist, right?
I love it. Yep.
Since you've been on the last episode, we've had some listeners submit questions to us specifically for you.
Okay.
They don't care about my thoughts or perspective.
Sorry,
They're
Eric.
asking for you. So that's okay. I'm not offended at all.
You don't seem offended.
I'll be fine. I'll be fine. All right. Before we dive into those, let's hit some rapid fire questions just so that the listeners who aren't familiar with you get to know you a little better. Can we do that?
Okay.
These are designed to be rapid fire and fun, okay?
All right.
All right. So, Jeff, which fast food restaurant has the best chicken sandwich? If you had to get a chicken sandwich from somewhere.
Probably Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A?
Yeah.
All right. You're dead to me. Popeyes for me. But
I don't know if I've ever been to Popeyes. I don't do a ton of fast food, to be honest with you.
The Popeyes chicken sandwich, I'm just saying it'll change your life.
Well, it will. I mean, it'll give you a stroke, a heart attack.
There you go. There you go.
Diabetes. There's a lot of things that'll happen through Popeyes
right.
chicken salad.
What TV show have you been hooked on lately?
So there was this what was it called? It's on Apple TV.
The Chosen.
No, well, I actually do love The Chosen. Actually,
right,
Heidi's super into it.
We got to catch up. We're a little behind.
Yeah, there was another. What was it called?
I actually think I know what you're talking about.
It's the one on Apple TV where they're stuck in the office and they change places. They change mindsets on the way down the elevator.
Yeah. My wife and I watched Severance.
Severance, that's it. I like Severance a lot. It was
my wife and I watched one episode because you told me about it, and I was like, I'm out. This is so weird.
Really?
I was out.
Well,
now maybe I need to give it a chance.
No wonder people don't miss you, Eric.
They're just tired of listening to me.
Yeah, I like Severance. It was really fast. I like a different premise to things.
There you go. All right, what's one song that's been stuck in your head lately? Apparently some song about Johnny.
Yeah, who's Johnny? She said. That's a really good question. Song that's been stuck in my head lately. We're doing a new one at church called Provider. That one's probably the one that's stuck in my head the most.
Nice. What's the best book on leadership you've read recently?
On leadership.
Yep.
There's a great book called Team of Teams. That's an excellent book. It's not that new, but it's really, really good. I tend to find my best leadership books by reading biographies. So I'm reading one on George Washington right now and what it took for him to lead through Valley Forge. I love Winston Churchill. those kind of things. Like I'm gonna find my best stuff. I just listened to a podcast about, it's called the Business Wars between Microsoft and Apple, and like I would find the leadership styles of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates fascinating. The best organizational leadership books I've read, I actually reread them every 2 years, is anything written by Jim Collins. So Good to Great, Great by Choice, How the Mighty Fall, all those kind of things. Like if you are a organizational leader, that needs to be in your library, and you need to revisit those on regular basis, because the principles are really timeless in them.
Find the right seat on the bus, all that kind of stuff.
All that kind of stuff. What's your flywheel?
Yep.
All of it. That comes from that ecosystem of book.
Cool. All right. What's your go-to ministry podcast besides this one?
Besides this one, probably Carey Nieuwhof. I like he has guests. So Carey doesn't do the commentating himself.
Yep.
He brings in all kinds of people, and I find that variety of people really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Let's be honest. We're mimicking this podcast off of Carey's.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
We're just going to start cherry picking his leaders.
We're only like 4 million subscribers behind him.
I keep calling.
Here we come, Carey. Watch out if you're listening.
I keep calling Craig Rochelle, and he doesn't answer. All right. What's a new idea you're experimenting with?
A new idea I'm experimenting with is it has several names. It's the idea that you present the gospel and present the truth of scriptures, truth of scripture, on the basis of ideas. So what we are finding and have found is that our culture is very easily offended when you tell them there's a right, there's a wrong. We're trying to get past that offense to actually get an audience by presenting things in terms of a new idea. And instead of asking the question, is something right or wrong, we're asking, is it working for you or not working for you? And if it's not working for you, what if Jesus and the gospel had a new set of ideas that we could bring into your purview? So that is not in any way watering down or reshaping the gospel. That is communicating. It's no different than looking and saying, if I went from Ohio to Africa, would I put the gospel on a different set of cultural rails to help it make sense? And we're playing around a lot with that. That is a very loaded conversation. In fact, we had it a couple of podcasts ago, but we could probably do 10 podcasts just on that.
There'll be more to come for sure. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. I won't.
Yeah.
I'm not worried.
I'm talking to our listeners.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry, I was lost in the moment.
No, I love that idea and that concept. And I think it's fun even in this culture and context of working with churches and helping just reframe some of our thinking. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, last one, rapid fire. If you could solve one problem in ministry right now, what would it be?
How to communicate to a culture that is disinterested in church and disinterested in the gospel and the truth of the gospel. It's the one that I would absolutely solve. And I don't mean that like how to grow a church. I really mean that in terms of like how to have an audience,
right?
Where what Jesus says and what the scripture teaches us is even an audience that you would take or consider.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. There's probably a lot of problems that we have in ministry that we'd love to solve, and we could do another episode on all that. So thank you, Jeff, for hitting those rapid fire questions and letting us just kind of look inside your brain. You ready to hit our questions from our listeners?
100%.
All right. We had a listener submit a question. Thank you. Seriously. You're always welcome to email us, just info@buildmomentum.org. And we'll see those questions come in. We're happy to answer any questions. We want to be a resource. So a youth pastor sent in this question, and in some of my conversations with other youth pastors, they're like, "Yeah, that's a thing. How do you do this?" So the question said, "Sometimes I find myself consumed with thoughts of who isn't coming, who's not showing up to youth group, why they're not here, did I do something wrong, what I did or didn't do." and he said, like, I have a few things that I do to remind myself who is coming to be able to let that go. But could you give us some suggestions on how to handle that, or maybe frame your perspective around that?
Yeah, it's a real big question that everybody in ministry struggles with, right? Because you, on a genuine side, you love people and you believe in that the truth that you're presenting and trying to build into their life is of great value. It's what they need.
Yeah.
This is what I find. So I'm gonna start answering this in a way that is going to hit people personally. So if you're gonna have to be patient and accept this answer, but that question, I struggle with that question too. Everybody does. That question is rooted in our insecurities. So we have to know that, right? So we have to know that me being disappointed in who didn't show up as opposed to excited about who did is rooted in my insecurities. I either wanted an individual to respond a certain way, or I wanted a different number, or I wanted to grow a ministry.
Yep.
And if we are not honest with ourselves about that, then we will address that question all wrong. Okay. Now, on a spiritual side, we have to look and say, who builds the church? So the people who are coming and the answer to that's Jesus, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
The people who are coming are the people that Christ is gathering. And so that's where we have to be careful and honest about where that question comes from, because when we say God gathered these 5 people, but he didn't gather these 10, what we're saying, and we don't mean to say it, I'm not trying to be judgmental here, but what we're actually saying is, I don't like the people that God gathered. I want him to gather somebody else. What I would say to you spiritually and pragmatically is the people who want to be with you are the ones that you want to start with. I was just working with a church planter in our network here at Grace Church, who's going through something that every pastor goes through. He's a new pastor. He came in, he made some changes that I think are the right changes. They're a little bit difficult, but he made those changes. I think they're healthy for the long term. And a bunch of people left and gave up on the work, right? So it left him with about half of the people that he would have had otherwise. That is wildly discouraging. That is deeply personally painful, because those are friendships in essence that kind of walk out the door, and it's probably healthy. And myself and our other coaches are looking at him and saying, you're better off with the 30 people who want to be with you than the 60 people who are sitting in the room. And every old grizzly pastor like me, who's been doing this for 30 years, will say that. It's correct. And we also sometimes lose sight of the fact that we're used to the pain.
Right.
And so we've been through that pain so many times that we're like, well, that's the way it is. And we can quickly lose empathy with it. So I would look at you and I would say, if you got 5 or 10 people, teenagers, whoever they are, wherever your spot in ministry is, who want to be there and who are eating up the relationship and are responding to your discipleship efforts, that's your gold mine.
Yep.
And what God is doing spiritually is he is building out a work for himself that is around those personalities and that receptiveness, as opposed to being around who you thought what was going to be there, right?
Yep.
So you live in that tension while not giving up on the other one. So if usually when you start a ministry, the first people that you can collect, I call them the stray cats. They don't really fit anywhere. Nobody else really pays attention to them.
That sounds like a lot of youth ministries.
Yeah, and they're kind of a extra need, care required people.
Yeah.
That's who God gave you. Usually what you're able to do, in addition to loving on those stray cats, is you're able to connect with a person or two that maybe is healthier and maybe is a little bit more attractive to their peers, right? balance is loving and building around these people. And instead of saying, where are those 10 people that I want to be here? Where are the 1 or 2 who love you, trust you, and will hang out with the stray cats?
Yeah.
After that, guys, I like to say in ministry, what you're looking for is dry wood. So if you're building a bonfire, you don't want to go cut a tree down and throw it on the bonfire. It won't burn, right? It's still green.
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to get dry wood and put it on there, and it will ignite real quick, right?
Yep.
So I'm looking for relationships that ignite quickly.
Yep.
And I'm going to keep feeding that dry wood. I'm going to allow myself to put my energy into those relationships. And that's what I'm saying that balance is.
Yep.
If I'm trying to get a bunch of green wood because I really wanted that and I thought that was going to be, I'm like, it's a bad play. It doesn't mean it won't dry out and get on there.
Right.
But I need to build with what's taking fire, and I need to fuel that and work with it. The other way that I describe this is I describe it in terms of mining, gold mining. That what you're doing is you're looking for a vein of gold, and you need to follow that vein. And in ministry, that vein of gold is a set of relationships, because relationships beget relationships. So I'm looking at, like, when I hit gold, instead of saying, but I wanted to mine to the right, or I wanted to mine up instead of down, I'm just following those relationships. And what you're going to find is that veins of gold are connected to other veins of gold. That's God building his church. Those are the relationships he's given you. Those are the opportunities he's given you. Follow those instead of wishing that they were something else.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't prospect other places.
Right.
Right. But it does mean, like, I'm going to work and I'm going to build off of what God has already given me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, Jeff. In essence, what you're saying is there's the old, like, I don't know if it's a pastor leadership principle, but like, I can only do what I'm responsible to do. You can only do what you're responsible to do, and we let God be responsible for him. If I could play the role of the Holy Spirit in other people's lives, I'd be the best pastor, parent, husband, etc. And yet, you even said it in a meeting earlier today, like, the Holy Spirit is a really good partner. And so we got to let him do his job and we do ours. And that's kind of that picture of what you're talking about here.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of all kinds of nuances to this. This is a question actually that to me is hard to answer in one setting, because I don't know what the listener's actually asking me.
Sure.
But there is a truth that the other way that I will say this sometimes is, if you're going to build a hospital, you don't start with patients. You start with doctors. So there is a truth that you need leaders and you need them connected. God is probably not going to give you 20 at once. He's probably going to give you 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Who's going to come instantly are the kids that don't fit anywhere. And for that leadership kid, his discipleship is about learning to love that kid. That is maybe a little bit more the outcast. For the outcast kid, that kid, I don't want to over romanticize them, because needy people are usually the most selfish people. So for that outcast kid, it's looking and saying, there's times that you need to let go of your time with me, or let go of your preferences, so that we can reach people who aren't like you either.
Right.
And when you get that flywheel turning of the healthy and the needy and the healthy and the needy, you wind up getting a really healthy ministry. What I think the question is asking me is, like, there's these 10 kids that I really have begged to come to youth group and they won't come.
Right.
And I'm like, well, stop begging.
Yeah.
Find the kids who will be there.
Right.
And pour your energy into them.
Mm-hmm.
You take the same, I have this little rule in life. I don't know if this is healthy or not. I probably need counseling, but my little rule in life is I don't beg. I ask, I invite, I follow up, but I don't beg. if you don't want to hang out with me or be a part of what we're doing, there's a point that I'm going to quit trying to convince you of that.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of people that I don't have to talk into it. What we believe God has called us to do is something that they've been looking for and their spirit's ignited by.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. Like those kids, I see youth pastors do this a lot with like their seniors in high school.
Right.
Like they'll beg for them to come in. And I would look at a youth pastor and say, don't do that.
Right.
If there's a bunch of freshmen that want to be there,
Yeah.
spend time with there. Plus, high school ministry, a high school student peaks out their junior year, not their senior year.
True.
They move on their senior year. And really your job as a loving pastor is to help them move on. It's to connect them to the next phase of life and ministry.
Yep.
Junior year is really the peak year with them.
Yeah.
So I look and I'll watch youth pastors come in and they're like, we have 50 disconnected seniors and all I got is 20 freshmen that show up every week. I'm like, then build it from your freshmen up.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean ignore those kids,
Yep.
but it means they've made their decisions already.
I love that you just mentioned that too, because we literally just had Todd Shoemaker on the podcast and he talked about how to transition, how to help your upperclassmen. How do you help them prepare for what life after high school looks like? So if you're listening to this and you didn't listen to that episode, go check that one out too. So thank you, Jeff. These are really good thoughts. So it's interesting that you kind of took the conversation that way, because it almost leads into the second question. This one's from a lead pastor at a church. And he said, I've heard Jeff say that if he was leading a smaller church, he would invest all of his extra time into training, equipping, developing leaders.
Yep.
So what would he recommend to someone who's leading a church of, say, less than 100? What would you encourage them to invest the majority of their time into? How does that work? He even went on, this was a buddy of mine who texted me and kind of was explaining, like, I've had 3 or 4 leaders. I was asking him for context, right? And he's like, I've had 3 or 4 leaders that we've partnered with and they've gone to other places as, natural things. Their families moved, nothing bad, but he's like, I'm losing them as fast as I'm gaining leaders. So how does he invest his time?
You double down on leadership development. So like what to, our brother who wrote this, as you're listening to this, that is a natural thing. So when you have a small church and you're trying to grow it, what you're doing is you're bailing water, and the only way to get ahead of it is to bail faster than you leak. It's the nature of the work.
Right.
I was working with a church planter one time, and he said, I'm frustrated with you, Jeff. And I was like, why? He said, because every time I ask you for a new strategy or a new coaching tip or thing, what you tell me to do is work harder. And he's like, is there something else you can tell me that's not work harder? And I said, work harder and faster. It's the nature of starting something that,
right.
You talk to any entrepreneur or you talk to anybody who's trying to take something from something small to something medium to something large. There's a reason that we all look like we've been run over by a train, because you have to work until you get momentum and until that flywheel turns on its own a little bit. The temptation of the smaller church pastor is to respond to the immediate need in front of you, because many smaller churches don't hire a pastor, they hire a friend. So they come spend time with me, come be in the hospital with me, come counsel me, come to my house for dinner every other week, all those kind of things. And the hard work of a smaller church pastor is to look at people and say, I actually do really love you, and I actually do really enjoy being with you.
Right.
And you need to be on mission with me.
Right.
So you want me to come meet with you and hang out with you every week. I need to do that once a month so that the other 3 weeks I can hang out with people that I have not hung out with at all.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that is always a cultural shift for a smaller church. That is most pastors like that struggle with a false guilt I'm not appreciating what God has given me. I'm not doing everything Jeff just said in his last answer. And I'm like, no, these are evolutions of things.
Right.
I don't parent one child the same way that I parent 6. Right. And I have to evolve, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad parent, and it doesn't mean my family's unhealthy.
Right.
It means that expectations and roles and like that change. So to this pastor, I would say, if you had 4 leaders and you lost 3, I would look and say, how can I create 5 when I lose 3 again, instead of being stuck with one I have 2?
Yep.
How can I have to flood that pipeline until I get momentum moving.
Yeah.
Right. So pushing that wheelbarrow up a hill
Yep.
is always the hardest when you start.
Yep.
It has another very difficult point. It's when you're about ready to crest the hill, because the hill gets steeper as you go up. So you're going to kill yourself and you're going to feel your legs burning until you get over a hump. If I can get over that hump and look at the next hill and say, actually, there's 3 of us now.
Yeah.
Over the next hill, now there's 6 of us. So I'll give you just a little encouragement. Like I've been here 30 years. We had a leadership summit 2 weeks ago. When I came, when I started the Bath campus 23 years ago, every leader I had would easily fit in our living room. 23 years later, they wouldn't even fit in our auditorium. And that's not because I'm awesome. That's because I'm a grinder. So I would look at this pastor and I would just say, grind it. Find 3 more.
Yeah.
If you don't have them, go lead them to Jesus and disciple them. Lean into them, cast the vision, and you're going to feel like this is all I ever do. And I would look at you and say, that's right. That's all you should ever do. What about the people who aren't leaders? Well, just love them.
Yep.
People, if you love people genuinely, they trust it.
Yeah.
So it's not, you don't cut yourself off.
Right.
But they will, extra care required people will 100% drain the life out of you if you don't balance your investment into them.
Right.
The fact that they haven't been able to move past needing that extra care tells you that they've probably moved as far as they're going to move. So I love them. I'm there for them when they have an emergency. I'm not going to play favorites. I'm not going to, do what James says not to do. But I'm going to be realistic about that investment. The best thing I can do for those people is to, instead of giving them one of me, is for me to create 5 people. Because if I can create 5 leaders, the 5 of us are going to care for them better than the one of us does.
Correct. Who's going to get burnt out faster too.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, I love that. And I think to go back to this previous question and conversation, it is like following those veins of gold and finding the connection. And so oftentimes I think I saw this happen a lot in my ministry. You find a connection in your community with somebody that your hearts are aligned. You're longing to do the same good work. So I found it in the schools as a youth pastor and got invited. I substitute taught to get into the schools, where then the school system's paying me to come on campus as a youth pastor. But then that led into my heart being aligned with some of the other teachers. And then you can I got to lead an after school program that was funded by a government grant. And you begin to find those avenues and those pathways. Maybe it's the community leaders in your community. It's finding out what are the things that they're trying to effort, and can we pull in the same direction? Can we team up?
And what you're saying is brilliant. You guys should listen to what Eric's saying. But here's the clarification. Mm-hmm. Let's pretend that the schools open up and say you can substitute teach. I'm not there to meet the kids. I'm there to meet the principal. I'm there to meet the administration. I'm there to meet because those are the leaders.
Yep. Build those really.
The kids are the ones who have needs. Now, I love kids and you love kids, and we'll meet their needs all day long.
Right.
I have to think strategically about who I'm building relationships with. So an example of this, I sit on a board for a drug rehab center. I have a very soft spot in my heart for people who are struggling with addictions. Right? I want to meet their needs. I have dinner with those guys about every other month. They come to our church. I love them. The reason I said yes to the board was because I care a lot about this ministry, and I wanted to be near the other board members.
Yep.
Right. So I'm putting myself in a position where I'm meeting those leaders and now having influence in their lives. So on a very practical level to this pastor, what I would say, and I would say this to every youth pastor too, you should have a weekly discipleship group or a bi-weekly discipleship group that is just leaders. And it's exclusive to them. And don't look and say a leader is somebody who agrees with me and loves Jesus. A leader is whoever's actually influencing your church. So when I was a youth pastor way back in the day, I would have the leaders of my youth group, I discipled them personally. They were not the most spiritually sensitive kids in my youth group, but they were the ones who led it.
Yep.
Even today, as a pastor, all these years later, I have circles now of people that I just disciple in leadership. Now they cycle out, like he'll do a 1 year with me or something like that.
Yeah.
You should always have that. So instead of leading a small group and you're one of 5 life groups, I would set that aside, let other people lead those life groups, and I would lead the leadership group.
Yep.
Instead of doing a Bible study where anybody can come, maybe you have the bandwidth to do both. I would have a Bible study where the leaders come to that Bible study. Instead of having an all-church meeting where everybody has input, I would have a meeting 2 or 3 times a year of the leaders of the church. And what you're doing is you're creating a leadership ecosystem.
Yep.
Leadership begets leadership.
Yep.
And you'll start to surface leaders. If you don't let leaders lead, they leave.
Yeah.
So now as I understand your heart and your character and your abilities, things like that, now I'm letting you run this meeting. Now you start your own leadership thing.
Yep.
And you create a leadership ecosystem. What happens is this. The proportion of sick people will always grow faster than the proportion of doctors. But I need way less doctors to attend to sick people. So if one doctor can attend to 100 sick people, 2 doctors can attend to 250. 3 doctors can attend to 600. See, it's not 1 for 1.
Right.
The most loving thing I can do as a pastor is create other elder level people for the flock.
Yep. Yep.
The herding sheep, the one that's in pain, doesn't know that immediately. So I'm going to love them and care for them, but not let them dominate my schedule or my efforts.
Yeah, so good. Cool. Thank you, Jeff. I'm sure we could talk more on that. We have one more question. See if we can do it 5 minutes or less.
Oh, my.
And maybe this is another episode.
The questions you're asking me are not 5 minutes or less questions.
I can't help what the listeners
explain
submit.
Leadership within the church.
All right. This one's about eschatology. I'm just kidding. This one's about finances. Maybe that's the same. How much education or involvement should pastors or ministry leaders have in knowing the financial state of the church? Do you have a helpful framework even around that concept?
I don't know if I call it a framework, but I would have some advice on it. You should, if you do not understand the finances of your church, you are not educated enough. So you should know where the money is, how it's being spent, how it's being allotted. The bigger your church, the more sophisticated that is. So I don't really, it's ironically, I just had a finance meeting this morning. I don't really care how you account for the money. I care that we pass the audit with flying colors. I don't really care how you do the depreciation of buildings and an accounting mechanism. I care when I said we were going to do this with money, are we doing that with integrity? So whatever that takes for you as a pastor to say, I understand, I trust and affirm that that's what's going on. And what I am communicating is accurate is the level of financial education that you have. If you're getting a report and you can't read it, that report needs to come to you differently.
Right.
If you're going into a meeting and you're being surprised by what you hear, you need to be delve deeper into the finances, because ultimately you're going to be responsible. Yeah. Now, there's a flip side of this coin. I don't think pastors should run the finances of the church, and I think you should have smart, trained people who are cooperative and believe in you. So I'm not going to have a lay person or a staff person, for that matter, look at me and say, well, you can't do that. I'm like, that's not your decision. That's my decision. What I want them to look at me and say is, that's really difficult. Let me come back and give you like ways that we could tackle that. Yeah. And they may come back to me and say, to do it, you got to raise some money.
Right.
That's fine. But like I'm not asking you permission to do these kind of things. It drives me nuts. When pastors try to be lawyers, when pastors try to be real estate agents, and when pastors try to be accountants. Because we would not look at a lawyer, a real estate agent, or an accountant and say, go ahead and preach sermons if you feel like it. So God gave you a body, lean into that body, but that body has to be cooperative, not controlling. And if you don't understand what's going on, then you need to get deeper into it or become more educated. Yep. If you can, with integrity, say, I understand what they're doing. I don't really care what software they're using to do it. And there is integrity in what I'm saying and what we're doing. You're good. I own, my wife and I own several businesses, so I deal with money a lot. I can tell you this as a pastor, I am the senior pastor, right? I actually have no way to access the money of my church. I don't even carry a church credit card. And I'm not saying that's a negative thing to do. Because our church is big and all the scandals and that, are in the news, I don't even want near it. Yeah. But I do understand our finances. And if I don't, that my finance team has to meet with me more to either make it make sense or change it in a way that can do that. So
I love that, because so much of your role as the senior pastor is communicating it to other people. And like you said, doing it with integrity and being able to be honest and forthright about that, but also helping it make sense to your people who are giving faithfully.
That's right. The trust is the currency of ministry. So when I say we're going to raise money for a new building, I could give a rip of what the custodial cost is going to be, how much we spent on paint, whether we're doing LED lights or real ones. Other people who are way better at that, what I'm going to look and say, did the money we raise go there, and did we pay for it like we said we would?
Right.
And when the answer is yes, and I understand and trust that, I'm like, that's integrity.
Good. Yeah.
We said it out loud, and then we did. The people also don't care if we, when we bought that bolt, we did it this way. I'm like, and if the people are that ingratiated into your finances, that's really unhealthy as a church also. When we're literally arguing over thread count on toilet paper.
Yes.
Kind of a stuff.
Yeah. Paint color.
Yeah. Make it work. Make it work with integrity. I think every church should get audited. Grace Church goes through an audit once a year, and it is a painful thing, but it gives us extreme integrity. And then they also, a good audit will look at you and say, and this is a better way to do that. We're like, thank you. Because I don't want any kind of a financial scandal. It would embarrass the name of Jesus and hurt the work of his church. So the more the better when it comes to that.
Yep.
But my finance people cannot look at me and tell me yes or no. I mean,
Right.
that's the elder's role. That's not
Yep.
your role.
Yep. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. This is super fun getting to pick your brain on some of these topics. Thank you to our listeners who have submitted these questions. Please keep sending them to us. If there's a topic that you're wrestling with or trying to solve and we can be a resource to you in any way, shape, or form, we're honored and happy to do so. So thanks for tuning in for another episode.
Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'd be really honored if you went ahead and subscribe to the podcast, and that way you can just kind of stay up to date with the episodes that we're posting in the future. To learn more about Momentum Ministry Partners and our many other resources, please be sure to follow us on social media at Momentum Ministry Partners, or check out our website, www.buildmomentum.org.